Welcome to Saulcast. Today we are talking about Better Call Saul Season 6, Episode 6, titled Axe and Grind. We did our instant take earlier in the week, right after we saw the episode, but now we've had a couple days to think about it, so this will be our full recap and analysis. I'm Gil.
I'm Adam.
Let's get into it. As always, we'll take it storyline by storyline, so for this episode, we'll go through Lalo and Mike, and then we'll jump over to Jimmy and Kim. So, we see Lalo visiting Casper in the woods. Clearly, he's followed the lead from last week's episode. We can assume that he visited Volker's, which is where Werner's slide rule was encased, found out who had it done. It was Casper, and then found him in the woods. They have a little bit of a scuffle. Lalo breaks a rib. Casper loses a foot. And then Lalo hands him those belts.
That was pretty gruesome. Like, in terms of thinking about gruesome things we've seen in the Better Call Saul Breaking Bad universe, that's got to be among like the top three. Like, we saw Danny Trejo's severed head on the Tortuga. Right. We saw, and then during that scene, like after it exploded, we saw some people who had limbs blown off. We saw the Jesse trying to dissolve the guy in the bathtub.
That's right.
Why would I get this container when I have a perfectly good bathtub?
And he starts leaking through the ceiling.
Oh God, yeah. So that was pretty gruesome. And then just seeing the guy, like at first you think, okay, maybe he just kind of sliced it. But then you look and it's like, well, his foot's pointing totally the wrong direction.
Yeah. And then, of course, there was Nacho shooting himself. There was Hank shooting one of the twins. I remember that being pretty gruesome.
That was a little bit out of focus, but yeah, that was a pretty good one.
Yeah.
The show doesn't get that gory that often, but when they do, it's like pretty well executed.
Especially Better Call Saul. I think it's had far less gore than Breaking Bad. And we've talked about that before. I think they're picky with when they show it, and that way it's more impactful.
Yeah.
After Lalo chops off Casper's foot, hands him a belt, and says, "Tie that off before you bleed to death. You and I are going to talk." What do you think he wants to talk about?
I don't know, sports or I don't know what's it like to be in Germany. If I were Casper, I would just let it bleed, and because I think that's the easier way out in this situation.
Yeah, you don't want to get tortured.
Yeah, but Lalo's just going to interrogate him, try to learn as much as he can about whatever they were building. He's hell bent on finding some kind of hard evidence he can show to Bolsa and Eladio to prove that Gus is not the man they think he is. That said, I think just based on what we know about Breaking Bad, I don't see how this hunt can be successful. It seems like he's closing in, but the fact is, in Breaking Bad, the Breaking Bad timeline, Gus is still working with the cartel.
Yeah, definitely things have shifted. We were worried about Nacho. Is he going to live through this or not? That question's been answered. There's no longer a question of will Gus succeed or not. Now it's just, how are they going to defeat Lalo? And what will the collateral damage be? That's partly why I think in the second half of the season, the Jimmy and Kim storyline has to collide with the Lalo storyline. So Nacho's not in the crosshairs anymore. Maybe they move Kim into the crosshairs. Not that they need that kind of suspense, but it does feel like that's lacking right now. And it'll come back if you're worried for Kim.
There's sort of this natural tendency in this universe for plot line. It's kind of similar to like Pulp Fiction or something, where like plot lines tend to weave together and intersect.
Yeah, and that's felt inevitable for a while. Mike went to see Kim. He told her that Lalo is still out there. So that felt like the seed planted, and now we need to see the stories truly collide, I think.
Right.
So this does feel to me like the last link in the chain that gets Lalo back to Albuquerque. You know, he went from Marguerite to Volker's to Casper. I don't see where Casper leads him besides the proof, which might just be information from him that when combined with everything else Lalo knows is enough. But it feels like the next time we see him, he might be in Albuquerque. I
do feel like just because he was kind of a more impactful character, I feel like we might see Kai again too.
Mm-hmm. Which,
like,
I
Casper
should say,
might lead Lalo to Kai for some reason.
That could happen, and I should say, in the instant take, I wondered if maybe this was Kai having grown a beard, because on Amazon, if you're watching it there and you pull up the X-ray feature, it tells you that Kai's in the episode. But apparently Amazon just pulls from IMDb, which can be edited by anyone. So if you think you know when Walter and Jesse are showing up based on the cast list, you probably don't. So that was Casper. And we should just say also, I kind of really enjoyed this scene. I love Dalton's performance when Lalo is wheezing and struggling to speak. That felt very real.
Yeah.
And
we've seen him do a lot of acting this season. Like his character acting and pretending. It's happened in a lot of scenarios. And first of all, as an actor for Tony Dalton, I got to imagine that's kind of a challenge because you have to play a character who's playing a character.
Right.
But it's also, it's kind of fun to watch him do that. And it naturally fits the kind of guy that he is, because he can just turn on, the same way he can turn on the charm, he can kind of look like a vulnerable victim, even though he's about to turn the tables completely.
And now what helped him here is I think he did break a rib. So at least the wheezing was kind of, he didn't have to fake that.
Yeah.
But divulging some of that information he did not have to do. But it gave him a chance to hold up that card or that sticker, and the camera swoops around and we see a little razor blade there, which was such an awesome turnaround. The kind of turnaround you always get with Lalo.
Yeah.
Then we cut to Gus's laundromat. So Jimmy is not the only one who's done some redecorating in his office, but Gus's place here is starting to resemble Breaking Bad's laundromat. Tyrus gives Mike a hard time because he took men off of his own house, off of Mike's house, and has set them up to watch his daughter-in-law and his granddaughter. Tyrus, by the way, he lists off the places where they've put some of Gus's men, and he mentions Varga's upholstery shop. So I missed that the first time we watched. But people have been asking, will Nacho's father come up again? Are the Salmacas going to go find him and kill him to just send the message, you mess with us, you die and your family dies? And it also might just be a sort of irrational thirst for more revenge. I've been doubtful about that. I did think it was a possibility. We'll at least get a little epilogue that shows us Mike is looking out for Nacho's father, holding up his promise. And we get that here. And I would be happy if this is the only mention of it we get. A sort of subtle way to tell us Mike is doing the best he can to keep up his end of the bargain.
Yeah.
We also see the way that Tyrus kind of speaks down to Mike. We see that Mike is not yet in the position of authority we find him in Breaking Bad, where I don't think Tyrus would speak to him this way. So I think something has to happen between now and the end of the series. The only thing I could think of is Lalo is out there. Maybe Mike is pretty key in taking down Lalo.
You know, Tyrus has such an S-eating grin on his face. The way he's like looking down on Mike. Mm-hmm. I almost feel like that's coming from a place of, you know, the fact that he's having, first of all, that Mike has these familial ties, that Mike has stood up to Gus before, that Mike seems to have some kind of morals. It almost seems like I'm reading a lot into Tyrus's expression and the way he's treating Mike here, so I could be off the mark, but I just feel like Tyrus almost looks down on Mike for those things.
Yeah, he's kind of laughing at him. Like, we're all badass. We can all focus on our cartel stuff while you've got a granddaughter you're taking care of. You loser.
Yeah, and it does seem like, you know, if you're entering the criminal world, you are more likely to turn out to be a loser if you have close family ties or people that you care about, because that's leverage that can be used
against you. That's a vulnerability. It reminds me of Victor's S-eating grin.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it probably came from a similar place. He was kind of laughing at Mike for caring so much about Nacho and insisting that he's going to be the one to beat up Nacho and make him look like a real captive. Yeah, it's a good point. So Mike calls Stacy and Kaylee. They think he's away in Chattanooga, but really he's across the street watching them. They have a sort of bonding moment where Kaylee's looking through a telescope and Mike helps her find Jupiter. So this to me was just a little reminder of what Mike is doing all this for. We've also been seeing the toll that Lalo's taking on Gus. We see how nervous he is. Now we see the toll that it's taking on Mike, where he can't see his family. And
he's barely sleeping. He's barely going back to his own home.
Yeah, he said he was only there for an hour a day or in the last week or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's pretty depressing because we know where Mike ends up. We know he only has a few years left before Walter kills him. And with that little remaining time, it's just so sad to see that so little of it can be spent with his family.
Yeah. That scene, just on a subconscious level, must have been somewhat impactful for me because just you reminding me about the stargazing, I had a dream then that I was also doing the same thing that he was telling Kaylee to do. I had a dream that I was looking at the what is it? The Big Dipper, and then like following it to that backwards question mark, and then seeing Jupiter.
But it was me on the phone with you instead of Mike.
Yeah, yeah. But you were doing your Mike impression the whole time.
That might just be Jupiter. I also think the show is often split in half with the Mike story and the Jimmy Kim story. And even when they don't intertwine plot-wise, I think thematically they'll often mirror each other. And we'll talk about it in a little bit, but the vet points to the picture of all the dogs. And Kim makes the comment that he knows what he's doing it all for. He knows why he's doing this. And similarly here, we see Mike looking at his reason. This is why he's doing all of this. It's for his granddaughter and his daughter-in-law. That's where we leave Mike, Gus. We don't actually see Gus in this episode, even though it was directed by Giancarlo Esposito, who plays Gus. But cool. Any other thoughts on this storyline before we go to Jimmy and Kim?
I'm glad that, so when you're in a season like the final season of a show, especially a show with as much depth as Better Call Saul, you have to start trying to answer some of the questions that have been lingering the whole time. At least if you want a satisfying ending, like as a counterexample, you look at something like Game of Thrones, where you have all, like, let's say you have the White Walkers, who are this kind of the kind of biggest threat throughout the series, and they're leaving cryptic symbols around, and there's a bunch of loose ends that you're really hoping you're going to get some answers to. That you never end up getting those answers. That's one thing that people complain about with the way that series ended. Here we can see they're making a deliberate, conscious effort to answer some of these more abstract and interesting questions, like moral questions. Why are these people doing the things that they do? You had Huel asking Jimmy that in a couple episodes ago. You have Mike and the vet discussing it. I'm glad they're addressing this issue in a way that it doesn't feel too in your face or too blunt, but it feels realistic, and it's pretty satisfying to see that these characters are actually questioning these things, because I think that's realistic.
And that's what keeps me interested in the show. These morally gray characters to me aren't interesting because, well, they're partly interesting because they do awful and wrong things. But I don't want to just leave it at that. I want to poke and prod at them, get them to look at what they're doing, get them to suffer the consequences of what they're doing, and see how they react. And to me, that's the fun of a character study.
One of the coolest motivations I think that we've learned about is Gus, for example. I think it's extremely interesting and really badass that basically he's the worst thing that ever happened to him. The cruelest thing you can kind of do to another person, that's what happened to him at the hands of Don Eladio and Hector Salamanca. And now we know his one singular focus for the rest of his life is revenge. And it makes sense, and it makes his character so much more interesting.
Yeah, completely agreed. So let's go over to Jimmy and Kim. We see a flashback, our second flashback to Kim as a child. Kimmy has shoplifted, so the store manager takes her to a back room to be chastised by her mother. Her mom gives a whole speech. Maybe we should call the cops. Nip it in the bud. But afterward, it's revealed that this whole speech from Kim's mother was a show for the manager. In actuality, she's proud of Kim. She tells her, "I didn't know you had it in you," and rewards her with earrings, which may be the earrings that Kim herself tried to steal. And they're the triangle earrings that we very often see Kim wearing as an adult. We see her wearing them this episode. So clearly this was an experience that meant something to her. So what is your interpretation of this scene? What does it tell us about Kim? So much there have been so many questions about why Kim makes the choices she makes. So if they're showing us this little flashback to her childhood, you've got to think this goes at least part of the way in explaining it.
Yeah, it sort of fills in more of the details regarding her, like the way her mind works, the way she developed over the years. So the only other time we saw a glimpse of her past was when her mom tried to pick her up from school. I think she was carrying a cello, and the mom was clearly drunk and behind the wheel, so Kim refused to get in the car. So that glimpse just tells us she probably had a rough childhood and kind of an unstable family life. It seems like there's no father in the picture. So, we know she doesn't come from a very easy life. And so it makes sense to us that she would not necessarily have a fully normal adult life either. Mm-hmm. But seeing something like this tells us, okay, not only did she have an unusual and difficult upbringing, but that upbringing involved scams, stealing, and deception. So it makes her gravitation toward Jimmy much more believable.
And we see positive reinforcement that when she did this bad thing, when she stole, her mother rewarded her for it. So you can see why, if this was not a one-time thing, you could see why that would train her to actually view that behavior in a positive light. And also, I looked at an interview with Arielle Levine, who wrote this episode. It's the first episode she wrote on her own. She's co-written a couple. And she kind of offhand mentioned maybe Kim did this for attention. And that got me thinking, after the previous flashback, where we see that Kim has a mother who doesn't act the way you'd expect a mother to act. She doesn't show up on time. She acts irresponsibly. Maybe Kim wanted to see her mother do a motherly thing. So she shoplifted, and she wants to be chastised. But she doesn't get it. Instead of that, she gets this unexpected positive reinforcement. And
so you're interpreting this as this wasn't kind of a pre-planned scheme between the two of them.
So initially I thought it might have been, but rewatching it when her mother says, "I didn't know you had it in you," I start to read the scene as her mother was actually surprised by this. I don't think it was a premeditated act.
I need to revisit that scene because that would make me want to look at the Kim character in that situation and see, once the mom's tune changes, once she sort of drops the facade of being the angry mother, does young Kim look surprised or relieved in any way?
She does, 100%. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm on board with the idea that Kim independently decided to shoplift, and the mother in the moment concocted this whole scheme.
Yes.
Which I think sets this tone for Kim's upbringing, which is this idea that she's seeing that you can get out of these situations by kind of spinning the right kind of lies and manipulating people's emotions. Like, they had the shop owner almost like feeling bad for Kim by the end.
Right. And then you see Kim use that skill. I would argue that when she talked Lalo into leaving their apartment, it was somewhat similar to her mother with the manager. Kim gets real tough and it tries to paint it like, "Are you crazy? Why are you even questioning this?" And there's a lot of truth in what she's saying, but it's a similar skill, talking your way out of that kind of situation.
Right. Or remember when Kim needed to, in order to help Mesa Verde, she needed to get these like schematics or some kind of thing that needed to get approved for some kind of zoning laws or whatever, some new construction of a bank. Mm-hmm. And so she pretends to be this pregnant mother who's like on crutches, and like in order to like spill the milk and then change the documents so that she can get this thing approved. And that was all her idea. So like we used to look at Jimmy as the guy who was kind of roping Kim into all of this, and he was sort of kind of gravitating Kim into the bad choice road. But it sounds like this is really who she is, and that goes along with what you've been saying for a while now. Like in your video analyzing Kim's character, you said that all this stuff with Jimmy is kind of bringing out tendencies that Kim already has. Maybe she had been suppressing them for a while. Like I get the impression that you're right, basically, that Kim's tendencies to do all of these like schemes and stuff has always been there. I feel like maybe it wasn't coming out when she was an adult working at HHM and going through law school, but it was still part of her. She had the tendency to think that way and the ability to do it. So meeting Jimmy just made it easier for her to start doing those things again.
It just woke something up that was already there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The only other thing I'll mention about the scene, a lot of people brought it up, but when they get in the car, Kim and her mother, the song The Reflex by Duran Duran starts playing. Mm-hmm. If you look at the lyrics of the song, they're not entirely literal. There isn't one accepted interpretation, but you can definitely see things in the lyrics that would be relevant to Kim. It says, "The reflex is in charge of finding treasure in the dark." So I think at least some of the lyrics seem to paint following your reflexes and your impulses in a favorable light. Sometimes your impulses can lead to gold. And I think we'll see Kim live up to that at the end of the episode, when she reflexively decides to drive a certain way back toward Albuquerque.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm acting like people don't know how the episode ends.
Yeah.
We see Howard and his wife, Cheryl. Howard is staying in what looks like a guest house, or at least a separate guest room in a separate part of the house. And he tries to do something nice for his wife. Makes her a fancy latte with a peace sign in it. And then she dumps it into her travel mug, spills a little bit on the table.
I love just Better Call Saul puts so much attention into little basic things like that. And, it'd be, some people watch TV and they're like kind of looking at their phone at the same time. And so they're still paying attention, but they're mostly just hearing it and getting a little peripheral view into what's going on. And for some shows, that's probably totally fine. Some shows, it's just people talking, and in terms of what they're feeling or what's in their minds, they'll just be saying it, so it doesn't really matter if you're looking at the screen. This show totally rewards attention. That's what makes a great show. And this show is extremely different from Arrested Development, but it reminds me of Arrested Development in the sense that every time you watch it, you're going to pick up more little subtle details and everything, from the words that they're using, the word choice, or just things that you could see on the screen. Definitely.
And I love just so callously the way she pours it into the travel mug.
Yeah.
The fact that it spills a little, which apparently was an accident. They weren't intending to spill it, but once that happens, that just works so perfectly for the scene. And then right after that...
so the actor who played Howard, improvised and wiped it up?
I don't know. I assume so. All I know that they said is they weren't planning on spilling it. So I assume he kind of rolled with it and just wiped it up.
I mean, it fits perfectly, so.
It really does.
Yeah.
And then when they discuss this upcoming event, is he going to go or is she going to go? He suggests maybe they can go together. Yeah. And she says, I'll go. And he says probably for the best. And you can hear in his voice that he's a little heartbroken. And the camera cuts to his face. And where Howard is always putting on a smile for everyone around him, this is a rare 1 or 2 second glimpse into his real feelings, which are, he's not very happy right now, I don't think.
I really feel bad for him.
And clearly that's what they want us to feel.
Yeah.
And you can say, and we talked about this on the Instant Take, we don't know what got them to this point. Maybe he treated her even worse than she's treating him right now. Mm-hmm. But all we see in this scene is somebody trying very hard and their partner just completely shutting them out. So it's kind of impossible, or it's very hard not to feel bad for him, which makes me very worried for whatever's going to happen next, because this feels like building sympathy for a character where some people might not have it. There were a lot of people that did not like Howard early on, and they've done some things to make us at least empathize with him. And I think this is another moment of trying to crank that up, so when tragedy befalls him, we're not going to feel great about it.
And I this is just another great example of how good the writing is on this show, because they've taken their time. They've really, really taken their time to make us care about Howard. It's easy to kind of view him as sort of a jerk for the first couple of seasons, but over time, first you learn that it wasn't him. It wasn't his fault that Jimmy wasn't getting a job offer at HHM. Chuck was basically forcing Howard into that position. Mm-hmm. Howard would have been fine with it. And over time, Howard starts to become more self-reflective. He gets like the namaste thing, which on one hand, it seems kind of douchey, but on the other hand, shows you like he's really trying to make an effort, I think, to loosen up. Mm-hmm. And so over many seasons, they get your feelings toward him to change to the point that, you know, he seems like a much better person at this point than Kim and Jimmy do. And then I just want to contrast that again with a show like Game of Thrones, where you've seen them in a single episode introduce a new character, try to make you like them, and then kill them by the end to try to create some kind of emotion. And that just doesn't work. It's way too fast. I barely know this person. And as soon as they introduce them and try to paint them in a likable fashion, you know exactly what they're doing. They're setting up for some kind of tragedy. Here, I still think they're setting up for tragedy, but they really actually made me care about him, and they showed me many different aspects of his life.
Yeah, completely agree with all that. And it brings up a question that I see debated a lot in comments in the chat, which is, does Howard deserve what Jimmy and Kim are going to do to him? And I actually think I'm going to moralize for a second. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the point is that just even asking that question is incorrect. Because in reality, people don't deserve one thing or another. If you think about prison, for example, in the most idyllic sense, if things were working in an ideal world, the point of prison is not punishment. It's not that you deserve this. It's because we've deemed that certain behavior needs to be discouraged and people need to be rehabilitated. It's what's best for us. It's not about deserve or not. And if something bad happens to you because you've done something wrong, it's not that you deserved it. It's just that immoral behavior, by definition, is going to lead to bad outcomes eventually, right? This stuff will catch up with you. So I don't think it's right for someone to take it upon themselves to enact justice and put into the world what they think people deserve. That's what Jimmy and Kim are doing.
From your perspective of viewing prison as more of a practical answer to a problem rather than some kind of moral or like cosmic justice or some kind of moral condemnation. In that sense, what does ruining Howard's reputation do? What kind of good does that do in the world? Does it potentially cause the Sandpiper case to settle more quickly? Possibly. But who's to say that that's, worth, who's to say that the ends justify the means here? And also, who's to say that destroying Howard's reputation and his life is the only way to accomplish that?
Right. Yeah, completely. And we know it becomes very clear. It's hinted at, and it becomes very clear this episode that they're not doing this for the Sandpiper settlement. They want to take down Howard, and they're going to take some pleasure in his suffering. And putting aside this whole question of does he deserve it, does he not deserve it, doing that, taking pleasure in someone else's suffering that you're inflicting, is not going to lead to a happy life. I think Jimmy and Kim are doing unquestionably the wrong thing, whether or not Howard is doing something immoral. For example, when Howard is saying that we need to hold out for a bigger settlement, is he doing that because he wants more money? Or is he just doing that because he does think it's the right thing for those folks at Sandpiper, all the residents?
Right. And I got to think that it's some mix of both, right? Like, to him, it might feel like win-win.
Right. Exactly. I think to wrap all that up, asking the questions of who deserves what, and then taking that into your own hands, that's what Jimmy and Kim are doing. And this is this show and Breaking Bad, I think, are both very interested in morality. And I think what they're saying here is that when you do bad things catch up with you. And taking what Howard deserves or not into their own hands is clearly a big step in whatever downfall they're heading toward.
Right.
So Howard goes through photos with his PI, and he sees a photo of Jimmy taking out about $20,000 in cash. So later, we'll see photos of Jimmy handing something to a Casimiro lookalike. So we can assume they'll try and get those photos to Howard. Howard will put two and two together and think that Jimmy has taken out $20,000, then gave it to Casimiro as a bribe. That's the way I'm reading the situation.
So just to be clear, those photos that we see of Jimmy handing something to the lookalike of the judge, those were not taken by the PI.
So that's a great question. My assumption was that they were not taken by the PI. Then Jimmy and Kim will try and get those photos to Howard and make him think they came from the PI. So some people have brought up a couple good points, which is, one, they have perfectly mimicked the style of photos that the PI is taking. Like, would they just know he's taking black and white photos, they're printed on pieces of paper roughly, this size?
Yeah, that does sound kind of unlikely.
And then on top of that, we'll get to it, but Jimmy and Kim go and hang out right outside HHM the night before D-Day.
Yeah.
Which would be a dead giveaway if the PI saw them. So people have wondered, is this PI truly working for Jimmy and Kim? And somehow, see, I have a hard time wrapping my head around that, because you would think Howard decides, I need a PI. He goes out, asks his close contacts for recommendations, or he has a PI he's worked with in the past. He finds him. How do Jimmy and Kim get a PI that works for them to pretend he's working for Howard?
Yeah, that sounds way too convoluted and hard to believe. So I'm not sure how they're going to address this. So it seems like either we're misreading it and somehow those photos actually were taken by the PI. I don't see exactly how that's possible. Or Jimmy and Kim staged those photos, which sounds... I mean, that's got to be what it was.
Because they were definitely staged.
Yeah, they were working with the film crew. So, so we either have to suspend disbelief and just assume they were able to predict what kind of photos and how they're going to be printed, like that they knew what the PI was doing, or who knows? Maybe this is a question mark that I hope we get a satisfying answer to it.
Yeah, they could have been watching Howard the same way he's watching them. They saw him looking at the photos, so they know what the photos look like. And we have seen many times in this show and in Breaking Bad that we have the ability to sneak things. Huell can bump into somebody and suddenly Howard's holding a different envelope, so he sees these staged photos.
Yeah.
So I think,
maybe the photos don't have to look the same as the other ones the PI have, because I don't know, maybe Howard will just be like, oh, maybe use a different camera this time.
Right.
Who knows?
Yeah, so I could definitely see it working without the PI being a double agent. I could also see it working with the PI being a double agent.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll get more clues as to what's really going on here. Mm-hmm. We see Jimmy and Kim at the vet, Dr. Caldera, and they're
love the vet.
I was very happy to see him show up again.
He's my favorite kind of side character in this universe.
Of all the side characters introduced, if they were going to do another spinoff, like that's one that I could see.
Yeah, I would like that. He kind of seems like a character in Grand Theft Auto that you could just visit whenever you want and get a side quest. Yeah. Like he's not part of the main plot line, but whenever you want to do some kind of fun side quest, you just go over to the vet. Like he even has the look, like he visually looks like the kind of guy you'd see in a Grand Theft Auto loading
That's
screen.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Well, we see them testing some kind of a drug on Jimmy. It appears to be something applied topically. He makes that comment about how his skin's a little dry where he applied it. Causes your eyes to dilate, and it will feel like a couple of Red Bulls on an empty stomach, depending on your usual caffeine intake.
Yeah.
So the drug is applied topically, which would make it the perfect candidate for sneaking into someone's system. You don't have to sneak it into a drink or anything like that. Huell just bumps into them and smears some on their arm or their hand. So I've got to assume this drug is meant for Howard.
Yeah.
Now, what's the point of that? At minimum, it would make someone think that Howard is on something. They'll see dilated pupils. Maybe he's a bit more jittery than usual. And it might even impact his behavior. If it gets him all hopped up, and then he sees photos of the judge seemingly taking a bribe from Jimmy, maybe that elevated state will cause him to just start throwing out accusations right then and there. And we've been thinking that that's part of his downfall, is that he's going to start making a lot of public accusations against Jimmy, now against the ex-judge, Casimiro. That's going to make him look very paranoid.
He's going to be sweating and like jittery.
Shaking hands. Yeah, so just like Chuck when he started accusing Jimmy of everything at the bar hearing.
It's going to be like George Costanza trying to give a presentation after eating Kung Pao chicken.
That's right. When he's all sweaty, yeah.
Yeah, sweating. Everyone thinks he's lying.
Have you heard anything about the missing equipment?
No, not a thing.
Are you feeling all right, George?
Fine.
You look a little warm.
It's a chicken.
So they clearly want this to happen publicly. The fact that they're calling it D-Day. We're going to see them shortly get the call-in information for the mediation meeting so they can listen in on it. The one thing I'm wondering is they seem to be counting on the fact that when Howard sees these photos, he's going to make those accusations tomorrow publicly. So I wonder if there's going to be some kind of inciting incident. Do they have a plan where somehow they'll kind of force the issue? Maybe they get somebody on the call to raise concerns about Howard, and he has to defend himself, and he goes a little too far in defending himself. So that's something I'm wondering as we approach D-Day. So the vet also in this scene announces that he's going to retire to focus on helping animals, and he just happens
Like he's such a likable guy.
He really is.
Yeah.
And he tells them about his black book. What black book? Oh yeah, this is where I keep all my contacts in the underworld. But it's all written in code.
Right, he's like, oh, I guess he's the Zodiac.
Yeah, there's that great comment from Jimmy. But we do see the business card for the vacuum repairman, which Kim comments on. And we do also see this black book ends up in the no value box in the season opener when they're going through Saul Goodman's house and cleaning everything out. So we know Jimmy's going to get a hold of this book at some point. So
it's hard to believe they'd throw that, and I don't know exactly what's happening in that scene. It seems like they're collecting evidence, or maybe they're just repossessing a bunch of stuff. But because if it's in a no value box, you think they're sorting it by monetary value. But from a criminal investigation standpoint, that you don't think I feel like that black book would be very valuable.
Yeah. Well, so seeing the no value box makes me think that it's all based on legitimate monetary value. That they're taking all this stuff maybe to be sold at auction. Or I don't know, we talked about this a little bit. I don't know in these situations what you do with a bunch of valuable stuff that belong to a criminal.
Yeah.
But
I'd probably pay $50 for that, like Saul Goodman cardboard cutout.
Even after it was all soggy and they pulled it out of the pool.
Well, that's the thing. Like they were treating it as if it had no value, but I would buy that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that black book would be worth a lot on Silk Road.
Yeah.
On the dark web, on Tor.
Yeah.
So a couple things happening here. On the plot level, they're planting the seeds to tell us how Jimmy gets all of his underworld contacts in Saul Goodman. You've got to think he's got that little black book. He's got that business card. So maybe this is where he gets a lot of those contacts. And so at some point, he's going to obtain that book.
That's probably how he figures out. He finds that guy who's willing to go to prison and pretend to be Walter White.
One of my favorite just things that Saul Goodman has introduced to this world. And I think that was actually in Saul Goodman's introductory episode in season 2 of Breaking Bad.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome. And then theme-wise, Jimmy is shocked that the vet wants to walk away from this passive income. And Kim responds, looking at all the pictures of dogs, well, he knows what he wants. And that primes us to wonder if Kim knows what she wants. And like I mentioned earlier, I think it ties into Mike knowing what he's doing it all for when he looks at his family.
Right.
Kim meets with Cliff. So basically, Cliff watches her at work in court. She does a great job defending one of her PD clients. And then Cliff meets with her after, and he asks how she left things with Howard Hamlin. And she says, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for Howard. I wouldn't be an attorney. I wouldn't have met my husband. I owe Howard and HHM a lot. Then he tells her about the Jackson Mercer Foundation, who focus on justice reform. They're going to be expanding into the East Coast soon, and he thinks that Kim could be a part of it.
I mean, no, they're already on the East Coast, but they're going to expand to the
West Coast. That's right.
Right.
So Kim is saying all these things about Howard, which would be a totally valid way to read this from an outsider looking in. It would appear Howard and HHM have done a lot for her, which just begs the question, why does she hate Howard so much? And you and I talked about this on the Instant Take. I thought it would be helpful to take inventory again. Why does she hate him?
Right.
Well, we know early on he did punish her at work, put her in doc review a few times, and it seemed a little bit vindictive. It's questionable whether or not that was the best way to foster one of your employees.
And what did she do to get that punishment?
A couple things. One is when she let the Kettlemans go. She was pretty hard on the Kettlemans, saying, we know you're guilty. Your best option here is to go for a plea deal. They weren't happy with that. They stormed out. Arguably, maybe there was no better way to go about it. They had their heads so firmly in the sand, there was no way to be reasonable with them. The next time she gets punished, I think the next time, is when Jimmy airs that commercial without getting permission at Davis and Maine. Kim knew about it and didn't tell anyone. So they punished Kim for that. And to be fair, again, if Kim knew and didn't say anything, that's a problem. What they don't know is that Kim assumed Jimmy had permission because he all but told her that he had permission. So a little bit unfair, but you can see it from their perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like she deserved, I don't know if she deserved punishment, but she did. There should have been some kind of consequences.
Yeah, she was clearly, her judgment was clouded by Jimmy. And it was making Davis and Maine. It didn't end up being a big problem, but clearly the firm was potentially going to suffer for it.
Yeah.
We also know, we brought it up earlier, Howard, even though it was Chuck making him do it, at the end of the day, you always have a choice. Howard chose to be complicit with Chuck and blocked Jimmy from working at HHM. Not the best behavior. And then the thing which I think pushed Kim over the edge and gave her the idea of tearing down Howard was in the season finale of season 5, when they bump into each other at the courthouse. And Howard deeply offends her by implying that her quitting Schweikart and Coakley was an impulsive decision brought on by her relationship with Jimmy. I think some people will hate me for using the word, but he essentially took agency away from her in that moment, and she clearly hated that. And that's not the first time we've seen him condescend to her. When she quit HHM, he told her, I want you to know that I always pushed you harder because I knew that I could expect more from you. So he's been condescending to her, and you could see why all of this would have rubbed her the wrong way. So I think, the one other thing I'll mention is that HHM paid for her schooling. I've seen some people say that Howard lorded that over her. I never necessarily got that impression. To me, it always felt like she kind of held it over herself. When Schweikart and Coakley wanted her to come work for them, she's the one who said, they paid for my schooling. I kind of owe it to them. Same thing when Jimmy wanted to go into private practice with her. She was the one that felt guilt over it. And Howard was pretty quick to forgive that debt. So we didn't see everything. Maybe he did lord it over her, but I don't think we necessarily saw that on screen.
I think that's a very good summary of the reasons she would have for disliking Howard. And based on those reasons, I think a common thread between all of them is this idea that, first of all, Howard was, like you said, he was trying to push her because he knew he could expect more from her. I think he saw huge potential for her in law, on the straight and narrow path that he's on. And so all of these things, Howard is basically, in her mind, Howard is like a symbol of following the straight and narrow path, or basically almost being the sheep, like being a very good sheep rather than being a wolf.
Right. Though she would argue... sorry, keep going.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think she would argue that he's not on the straight and narrow, that he's taking advantage of a system that benefits certain privileged people more than others. I think in her mind, she's finding a way to see this as justice. Yeah. But I do think you're right, that he does symbolize more than Howard. He symbolizes that system.
I think maybe she, how we're looking at the wolf. I think Saul Goodman sees the world as wolves and sheep. That's the thing that's been well established in this show. I think Kim's view of the world is a little bit more complex than that. She sees wolves and sheep, but I think she sees, on the wolf side at least, there are good wolves and there are bad wolves. And I think she's a good wolf, and she thinks maybe Howard's a bad wolf. Yeah,
I think that's a pretty accurate way to look at it, at how she sees the world.
Right. And so she doesn't. She thinks she doesn't have to play by the rules or follow the kind of traditional path in life, because she thinks she can do more good in the world or enact more justice outside of the box.
As a bad wolf, as a good wolf, she can fight the bad wolves and protect the sheep. And one other thing I want to point out is that if you look at Jimmy and Chuck, they both had a view of each other that were kind of both self-fulfilling. Chuck saw Jimmy as a crook, and that kind of turned him into a crook. I think we're seeing a similar thing play out here between Howard and Kim, where they're both bringing out the worst in each other, I think. Because there is some truth in what Howard says. Maybe he's wrong in thinking that Jimmy is the reason she's acting out of line and moving off the straight and narrow, but he is right that she's making some pretty self-destructive choices. And when he says that to her, that might, in season 5, that might be the thing that prompts her to say, you know what, Howard, now I'm going to destroy your career. So his view of her that she's doing bad things prompts her to go and do a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So Kim goes to the offices of Saul Goodman. She sees all the new decor that Francesca's putting up. Not exactly what we saw in Breaking Bad yet. Francesca congratulates her on her recent marriage. And in their office, you see, and that was just a funny moment because we talked about this on the Instant Take, but just seeing outsiders looking in. Francesca hasn't seen them in a couple seasons. So for her to come back now and just get used to these new updated versions of Kim and Jimmy, pretty interesting.
Right. She even says Jimmy, oh, I mean Saul, and she does like air quotes.
Yeah. I thought that was a great moment. In their office, we see that Jimmy and the film crew are preparing the Casimiro lookalike for his photo shoot, picking out the exact right mustache.
Yeah.
And Kim tells Jimmy about Cliff's offer. There's an important meeting coming up for the foundation in Santa Fe to meet with some up-and-coming organizations. The bottom line, if Kim can impress them at the meeting, she will have her dream pro bono practice. But that meeting is on D-Day. Jimmy assures her she doesn't have to be in Albuquerque for D-Day and asks, was Eisenhower on Omaha Beach? And then Jimmy just kind of says, hey, this is a big deal. This is exciting. And they kiss. So there's been this question. Does Kim really need the Sandpiper money, or can she start that practice without it? Finally, here we have a definitive answer. No, she doesn't need that money. And as we'll soon see, not only do we have a definitive answer to that question, but now she's going to have to make a choice between taking down Howard or getting that practice in a legitimate way. Again, I don't know why I'm acting like people don't already know how that's going to go. I'm building up suspense. What's she going to choose?
Well, I mean, this is part recap, so I think you're doing your job.
You're right. It's the storyteller in me. I can't shut it down. We see Saul Goodman's office during working hours, and juxtaposed against Francesca's beautiful decor, you have the dregs of society. You have some rough folks. We see them put out a cigarette on her armrest, and we start to see how Francesca is going to break bad. Yeah. Jimmy pressures her into making a phony phone call to HHM where she claims to be a daughter of one of the Sandpiper residents, and that gets them the call-in info for the mediation meeting.
The actor for Francesca, I think, did a great job in that scene. It was very realistic the way she was so uncomfortable, but ended up playing along with it anyway. Yeah,
it's kind of the perfect amount of reluctance, and you buy that she would ultimately agree to do it. And what's really interesting is that if you want to draw a comparison to Francesca today in Better Call Saul versus Francesca in Breaking Bad, we will see her make another unscrupulous phone call when she calls Hank and tells him that Marie was in a car accident.
Oh, yeah.
That's a much worse phone call to make, and one that I think no matter how much pressure Saul Goodman put on her, in this moment, there's no way she would agree to make that call. But she would agree to make this call to HHM to get the call-in info. So it just shows you kind of 2 points on the slippery slope of Francesca here to Francesca after having to deal with Saul Goodman and his clientele for 4+ years. I hated Jimmy pressuring her. That, we've talked about how we're starting to turn on Jimmy and Kim a little bit these last few episodes. That was kind of hard to watch, but felt very Saul Goodman. So he's really starting to get comfortable in that role. And the guy urinating in Jimmy's office, hilarious. Tries to get Francesca to clean it up. Hey, clean up on aisle 9.
He tries to get he's like, what are you doing? And the guy turns around and he goes, no, go back.
It's a great scene.
Yeah.
Then we see Jimmy and Kim at home reviewing their little Post-it note board where they have their whole plan laid out in symbols and little images. We get a much clearer view of it now. So if you freeze frame on it, here's some of the stuff you see. One, there was one Post-it note that we thought was either a magnifying glass, maybe a tennis racket. Confirmed it is a magnifying glass. I interpret that step as this is when Howard has a PI watching us. The next step after that shows the scales of justice. I assume that's figuring out who the mediator will be. The next step is the camera. That's getting pictures of the Casimiro body double. Then we see an eyeball. That's got to be the drug, the dilated pupils. And underneath the eyeball, you see BPM. So I assume that's beats per minute. Maybe they want to get Howard's heart rate up.
Yeah.
Under that, you see Red Bull, question mark. Maybe they thought, can we sneak Howard or Red Bull somehow? And then underneath that, you see drug trial. And you got to assume that's when they tried out the drug on Jimmy. And then finally, you see timing, question mark, 25 minutes. Probably how long does it take for the drug to take effect? They decide to go out to Omaha Beach, where they enjoy some wine just outside of HHM, and they cheers, here's to tomorrow. So this feels like this felt very much like the night before D-Day, the calm before the storm, right?
Yeah.
And we talked about it earlier, but again, odd choice for them to sit right outside HHM unless the PI was hired by them. So if he sees them, it's not a problem. And one thing I keep forgetting about is that Mike also has people following Jimmy and Kim. So I don't know if that really matters that there are two people following them, but it might actually explain, well, I was going to say it might explain how they know about the style of photographs if Mike's people saw it, but they're obviously not talking to Jimmy and Kim. So.
Yeah.
Anyways.
I wonder how they're going to get the topical drug on Howard. Is it like they're going to shake hands or something, and then he's going to be like, oh, what was that? Or, I'm wondering, we saw Howard's morning routine. I don't think at any point we saw him like apply moisturizer or like shaving cream or something. But I mean, that would have made sense. Like, let's say they showed him his part of his morning routine is to like moisturize.
Right.
Then they can just slip that
spray on tan.
Yeah.
I mean, my mind always goes to Huel, right? Can you overuse that? I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, it would like Huel just comes up and just goes to his face.
Gives him a hug, and it's like on his cheek.
But so I don't know how they're going to do that, but it could. It'll be fun. I love watching them figure out that stuff.
And that's part of what has been fun about this season. You know, it feels like an odd choice and an unusual choice to have them plan this con and not let us be in on it. Pete pointed out the other night on the live stream, or it might have been Jim actually from Bald Move, but that's not unusual actually. There have been times on this show where Jimmy and Kim come up with a scheme. We don't know what it is in advance, but we usually find out that episode or the next episode. The unusual thing...
The first example that comes to mind is when they're sending all those letters on behalf of Huel. Yeah,
that's right. We see Kim picking up a bunch of pens and notebooks, envelopes, and you don't know what they're doing. But the very next episode, you find out. So yeah, the difference here is it's just drawn out. So we're in the dark more than we usually are. But to your point, there's some fun in that. Because how are they going to get the drug into Howard's system? And you see actually a Post-it note that says, let me see here. I think it's delivery how, which could be both the drug. It might also be how do we get the photos to him so he thinks they're from the PI. But the next morning, it's finally here, D-Day. Kim heads off to Santa Fe. Jimmy heads to the liquor store to pick up some celebratory Zafiro Añejo. He's warned by the person at the shop. He's warned about the sharp stopper.
Yep, great symbolism.
Yeah, that's right. Jimmy happens to see Casimiro at the store, the actual ex-judge who will be overseeing the mediation, and notices that he has a broken arm, meaning he will no longer match the body double. We usually get 1 or 2 F-bombs per season. We get one here. Jimmy gets in the car and just yells the F word. And then he calls Kim. And we find Kim in the car driving, rehearsing what she's going to say at the foundation meeting. She says, ultimately, it's about equal justice. a system that works for everyone, a justice system that works for everyone. And what is more important than that? At that very moment, she gets a call from Jimmy, and we are about to find out what's more important than that. Jimmy says they should call it off because it's not going to match up. We'll figure this out another day. Kim disagrees. D-Day is happening today. So she makes a sharp U-turn and heads straight down Bad Choice Road. She's not going to take a half measure. She's got an axe to grind. Trying to think of as many titles I can bring in.
Yeah. So I think this scene makes perfect sense. I have no problem with it at all. Mm-hmm. But something about this season has felt different to me in a way that it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I'm just saying nothing about the quality of the season, the writing, or anything like that. This kind of a subjective feeling I've had, and it's been hard to place it. But I think this scene sort of clarified to me what's been feeling off. Mm-hmm. And what it is, and again, it makes sense. So Jimmy just went through this experience in the desert. He almost died. He's kind of still getting over it. Meanwhile, Kim is quote made of sterner stuff. She's starting to kind of pull all the strings here. Mm-hmm. And it makes sense. Like, I get it. I understand it, and I have no problem with that direction for the storyline. But I think the feeling that's been sort of weird for me is just seeing Jimmy/Saul in this more passive position. Mm-hmm. So for most of the series, we've seen him driving the plot, him doing a lot of the scheming and making a lot of the decisions. But here, I agree with him saying, let's call it off and figure out let's regroup and figure out the plan. But Kim's the one who says, no, we got to do it today. And she, then she makes that hard U-turn. And so I just think the feeling that I've had of like, there's something wrong or there's something weird going on this season is I'm not used to seeing Jimmy in this passive position where he's not really in charge anymore. Again, that's not a complaint, but I think it helps pinpoint why does this season feel weird to me and kind of different.
And I think that's very intentional. Like, I think you're supposed to be feeling that. And it's something we've brought up a couple of times where we've said that we have not really seen Jimmy make a choice this season. We've seen him take some pretty interesting actions. We've seen him pull out all the Saul Goodman tricks, like when he was at the country club and had to improvise his way into the bathroom. But we have not seen him really make any kind of choices this season. And I think it's got to come at some point, and you wonder if it's going to create a conflict between him and Kim, where he has been reluctant to go forward with this plan. Eventually he got on board. Now he's reluctant again, and he's back on board. You have to assume next step. We don't watch the next time on, so I don't know what's coming, but you have to assume he's going to work with her here. Are they going to get to a point where he wants to back out, or it's time to put up the brakes? And
I think it was really important, that scene where he said, the wicked flee when no man follows, right? Or no one follows. He knows that they're doing something bad. He knows that they're being wicked. And I think he's not that comfortable with it.
Yeah. No,
Whereas Kim sees herself as this arbiter of justice. She doesn't think that they're doing anything wrong.
Right. It's exactly what I talked about earlier. Howard deserves this, and she has taken it upon herself to be the good wolf that will dole out what is deserved.
Right. So like kind of that big moral question that this season and the show as a whole is demonstrating is, in the world of wolves and sheep, can you avoid being a sheep? Does being a good person automatically make you a sheep, or does standing up for the little guy, or kind of standing up for justice and not taking matters into your own hands, does that automatically make you a loser or make you a sheep? I think Jimmy wants to be the wolf. He wants to be the wolf that's not really harming people who don't deserve it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, completely agreed. And I think one of the running themes of Kim has been trying to have her cake and eat it too. She wants to do, it's sort of exactly what Mr. Acker accused her of. She thinks she can do a little good and that makes up for all the bad she's done. She thinks she can do that. She can do something wrong, but then use that, the proceeds from that to do something good, open up this pro bono practice. And here, when she turns the car around, you have to assume that she knows she is very much harming her opportunity with the Mercer Foundation.
Yeah.
Now, she may be lying to herself here. I do think it's possible that she thinks there's a way to still salvage the opportunity. What if she makes up an excuse for why she missed the meeting? Maybe she suddenly became violently ill. So I can imagine a scenario where after D-Day goes down, she tries to bring the opportunity back, and Cliff just tells her, Kim, it's too late. You had to be at that meeting. That was very important. And this might be the first time where she learns that lesson. You can't have your cake and eat it too.
And we've seen her when someone confronts her directly with that sort of statement, we've seen her lash out. Remember the way she was she telling off Schweikart, exactly, right in front of everyone in a way that was pretty embarrassing and inappropriate. It didn't make her look good, and it seemed like she lost control.
Yeah, I think that was right.
That didn't
after...
seem like a.
Hey, go ahead.
That it didn't seem like a deliberate choice or some kind of intentional manipulation. It seemed like she was just lashing out.
It's a sort of a defense mechanism. When she feels guilty, she kind of turns it around.
Oh, right. So Schweikart accused her of intentionally screwing up the case against Ackerman, right?
That's right, because he knew that he suspected that she was working with Jimmy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when she's called out for what she's doing or has to face up to the facts and face reality, she didn't respond well to it. And I think we might see a similar kind of explosion in this season, and probably a bigger one.
Yeah, the first half of the season is about taking down Howard. Next, it'll be about taking down Cliff, because he blocks her Mercer Foundation opportunity.
Yeah.
I think I'd feel worse for Cliff than I do for Howard.
I feel bad for both of them.
That's where the episode wraps up. I guess at this point, anything else you want to say about this episode that we didn't already talk about?
Well, I was really surprised that we got all the way to D-Day in this episode. I didn't know. I kind of thought it might be it might happen maybe in the final episode of this first half of the season, which that is what's happening, but I didn't expect for us to actually get to that day in this episode. I thought it would take longer.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about that.
Part of me thought it might even happen after the break, like they'll leave us on a cliffhanger right before D-Day, but that's not what's happening, and it doesn't feel rushed though. So like they did a good job getting us there. I'm pretty excited about it. And it didn't feel like they moved too fast.
I love...
and it gets me excited because think how much more stuff there is to come afterward.
Absolutely. And I was just laughing because so many people have been complaining that it's moving too slow. So for you to say, I don't think it moved too fast. They'll be like, yeah, I know, it didn't.
I've been hearing a lot of people say that things are moving kind of slow, and that's sort of a criticism of the season so far. I don't feel that way at all. I think maybe those people should go back. They're entitled to the opinion. Like it's pretty subjective, but they might want to go back and rewatch like other parts of this show from earlier seasons, because I think those parts are way slower. To me, this feels like it's moving at light speed right now.
I think what might partly explain it is that I was surprised to find, just looking through comments and looking through the live chat, some people very strongly prefer the cartel storyline to Jimmy and Kim. And if you were just to look at the cartel storyline, not a whole lot's happened since Nacho died. Yeah,
that's true. You basically just have Gus, hanging around being all nervous that Lalo's coming for him. And, I mean, we had a few episodes where you didn't see Lalo at all. So I could there was basically only one major event on the cartel plot, which was Nacho committing suicide to get out of this situation.
Yeah. Since then, it's just been...
I understand that.
Yeah, since then, it's just been, Adam, did you know when Gus is nervous, he cleans stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So I could see finding that plot line moving pretty slowly. But usually, I think when this show does something like that, they are building up anticipation in a way that pays off. So I think just stick with it. I'm sure that the final half of the season will not disappoint when it comes to that stuff.
Yeah, agreed. I think this is not cartel side, but just in terms of setting stuff up. Chicanery, the episode where Chuck had his breakdown at the board hearing, that was like a masterful episode. Great acting moment for Michael McKean. And there was so much buildup. I mean, Jimmy and Chuck's entire relationship was building up to that moment. I feel like there'll be some moments like that in the next few episodes. So, yeah, I'm pretty excited. How are you feeling about the break? Having to wait 6 to 8 weeks in between halves of the season?
It's bittersweet. I like knowing that the show is not coming to an end as, that soon. We still have some time. I'm going to be going through withdrawals, during that time. I think maybe I'll fill it up by either rewatching the first half of the season, just to get reacquainted with it and get excited. I'm also like curious to go rewatch some Breaking Bad. So I think that's how I'll fill the gap. I also think it would be fun to continue doing some live streams during the break so that we can all kind of go through those withdrawals together.
That's what I was going to say. The best way to handle this, if you're really antsy waiting for the new season, is with the help of a great community. And we have an exciting announcement. Number one, yes, we may continue to do some live streams between now. Well, we still have another episode coming, but after that, between then and when the second half of the season starts up. But in addition to that, we're starting up a Discord. And we wanted to bring it up here first because I know that over here on Saulcast and on the One Take Podcast channel, it's like these are where the intellectuals hang out, Like on the One Take channel, we've got the Spider-Man recap. It's a pretty mainstream audience. So we wanted to start.
Yeah, we got all those thumbnails with Gil's face on it, looking surprised, and there's like a red arrow and a circle point. We actually don't really do that, but
we did it once.
Yeah,
but
it was kind of a joke, though. Yeah,
Not kind of a joke. It was an April Fool's joke.
It was April Fool's, yeah.
But none of that tomfoolery over here on the One Take Podcast.
None of that chicanery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, basically, if you're not familiar with Discord, if you know about Slack, it's similar to that. It's basically a place where you can chat with other subscribers, chat with us, and we'll have multiple channels in the Discord. So in the general Discord, talk about anything you want, anything that you think others in the One Take community would be interested in. And then there will be a Better Call Saul channel where you can talk about the show, no spoilers, but everything that's happened until now, and of course any speculation about the future.
And maybe we could also make a separate room where people can discuss stuff with spoilers, but you will not find me or Gil in there.
Exactly. So basically, there'll be a link in the description. Just click on that link. It'll take you right to that Discord. And like I said, you'll be part of a little exclusive club before we tell everybody else about it. And then don't anybody tell anybody about this, all right? Let's keep this secret for now. A little secret clubhouse. And then we'll tell everybody else about it on the main channel when the time is right. So with that, if you enjoyed this video, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more. If you don't like to see us and you'd rather just hear us in your ears, you can see the description for a link to the podcast, Saulcast. If you're listening to this and you want to do us a favor, we would be ecstatic if you went into the Apple Podcast app, left a rating or a review. And if you're sick of hearing us in your ears and would rather see us in your eyes, then you'll find a link in the show. There's a link in the show notes that'll take you to YouTube where you can watch this.
Just one more thing outside of all the promotional talk. In terms of things I want before the season break, I really am hoping for a Gene sequence.
Oh, wow.
Those are my favorite parts of the show. If they could end the season or end this half of the season with a Gene sequence, I will be so happy.
I think it's unlikely, but that would be great. I mean, the reason I say it's unlikely is, and it's purely my own speculation, so I guess I have no reason to think this is what's going to happen, but I have a feeling that we're no longer going to flash forward to Gene. I feel like the next time we get to Gene, it'll be because the timeline's caught up to him. Mm-hmm. Like we're going to have a time skip or somehow fast forward a few years and get to Gene, and then it'll be in color.
That'll be interesting.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, if there was a Gene scene in the next episode, that would be insane. But we'll see. Okay, with that, I'm Gil.
I'm Adam.
And this is Saulcast. Adam, between you and me, I mean, Howard deserves it, right?
Yeah, totally.
He's a jerk.
Eh.